someone at Blizzard thinks that Marks Hunters and Windwalker Monks are totally fine, because apparently there were no patch notes last Friday, for some really good reason probably. As a quick note, we will warn you that some players might have their 4 set this week, and we're here to give you an update on the Season 2 meta. Anyway, if you're one of the 10 PvPers who still do PvE, you could have a massive advantage in Week 3, depending on your spec. As we've mentioned before, there are some insanely good tier sets this season, including Affliction Warlocks, who will be able to spread Unstable Affliction like a disease thanks to their 4 set. And speaking of diseases, Unholy DKs might become passively better with their 4 set too, which gives them huge death coil damage during their 45-second burst window, which could be exactly what they need to be more competitive than Frost. And if you were hoping for Marks Hunter nerfs, it turns out their tier set isn't really that great, which means that the spec could slowly become passively worse as everyone else simply gets better gear. Of course, knowing what to buy each week is always a bit confusing, but if you're a skill cap member, we've taken all the anxiety away thanks to our add-on that now shows BIS lists directly in-game, including gear, enchants, and gems, updating automatically each week. Skill cap members also get the latest talent builds for every form of content, evolving every week as the meta changes, which means you're never out of the loop. Of course, these aren't the only perks skill cap members enjoy, as you even get fully configured add-on profiles, which now includes 2-in-1 support for PvE. We've also got brand new courses on our website, including how to counter every class, the best positioning guides on the internet, and of course the #1 class courses for gaining rating. Skillcapped has everything you'll need to hit your PvP goals. Players just like you are using Skillcapped to reach new rating heights, and that's because we continue to offer a rank up guarantee where we promise you can gain at least 400 rating while using our service. So what are you waiting for? Visit skillcapped.com today using the exclusive discount link below. For now, back to the video. Now it's time to look at the melee meta for Week 3. While we've changed some of our predictions from last update, one thing that hasn't changed is the fact that Windwalker Monk might be the best melee in the game depending on who you ask. It's still sharing the top 4 with Feral, DH, and Assassination Rogue, but Windwalker Burst is definitely in a league of its own, even after the nerfs to Slicing Winds and Celestial Conduit. On that note, one spec we've actually moved down in our rankings is Outlaw Rogue. While this might be the preferred spec for tournament players, Outlaw feels a bit lackluster right now in solo shuffle, lacking the damage needed to truly carry games. Sub-Rogue, on the other hand, does feel slightly better after last week's changes. As a reminder, Sub lost some of its big burst damage, but gained about 10% more sustained DPS overall. The only potential problem moving forward is that Sub doesn't have a great 4 set, so it might not have the biggest power spike in the coming weeks. But if there's one spec who will see some gains on Week 5, it's definitely Survival Hunter. The bad news is that Survival is now one of the weakest specs in the game after last week's nerfs. And in the words of Big Mex, you have to make the spec your full-time job in order to be high tier, which is why we're demoting Survival to the mid-tiers for the time being. Not to worry though, because things will change once you get your hands on your 4 set bonus, which makes Mongoose Bite hit like a truck. But for now, Survival Hunters are in their tier set waiting room. And as a final note, we're also demoting Ret Paladin back to the A tier for the time being. While the sustained damage buffs definitely helped, Ret just can't carry games quite like our Windwalker Monk overlords. For the meantime, Paladins will be another spec in the 4 set waiting room. While final verdict damage isn't great, being able to press it back to back could make your sustained damage feel a bit more punchy. That brings us to our updated melee tier list, and as you can see, we've now made a pretty clear distinction between our highest tiers. Some melee are obviously standing out, while everyone else is lagging behind, and Fury Warrior once again being shoved somewhere in the middle. But now it's time to check in on the ranged meta for Week 3. If we had to pick an MVP so far, it's probably Beast Mastery Hunter, which might seem like a hot take, but we think that BM has flown a bit under the radar given the fact that everyone is too distracted by those big marksmanship one-shots. BM has some of the best set bonuses in the game this season and seems to do well in almost every lobby. Speaking of specs that have great set bonuses, we're going to be promoting Devastation Evoker up to the S tier for Week 3. Not only does Dev have some pretty nasty set bonuses, but as it turns out, having a spammable CC on a different spell school is pretty good for solo shuffle. Sleepwalk is one of the most broken abilities in the game for abusing healers, and now with a bunch of Giga tier melees running around, Dev Evokers have gained enormous value. The last spec we will be moving up our range tier list is Arcane Mage, who will be getting a promotion to A+, joining Frost for the first time in a while. Not only does Arcane have some pretty amazing damage and a great tier set, but as it turns out, Overpowered Barrier is, well, overpowered. For Arcane, this PvP talent grants 3 seconds of invisibility and immunity on a ridiculously short cooldown. Remember Evanescence from Warlords of Draenor? It's secretly back. That brings us to our range tier list for Week 3, where Hunters are dominating once again, but are now in the company of some pretty big bangers. And if you're wondering, Ellie Shaman is actually pretty good even though Blizzard accidentally nerfed them by 17% last week. So far their representation hasn't been too great, but keep in mind that once healer balance evens out a bit, we expect to see the return of everyone's favorite meatball chefs. And speaking of which, let's check in on healer balance. We want you to take a look at this chart and let us know if anything stands out. Nothing too strange, right? As we predicted, Disc Priest is still the best healer in the game despite a massive wall of nerfs last Tuesday. Listen, we don't need to tell you that Disc is a solid healer, since you probably figured that out by having multiple games go to 70% dampening. But what about Resto Shaman and Preservation Evoker? These two healers might be slightly worse for a reason we weren't expecting. Even though they're both really strong right now, Preservation Evoker was actually stealth nerfed by the CC change. As you know by now, Evokers like to play super aggressive, which meant it was kinda hard to CC them with traps and polymorphs since they were very likely to break on damage. Now that CC doesn't break quite as easily, Evokers have lost one of their key advantages. And while Restoration Shaman is still really good, especially in regular 3v3, it's still suffering the whole human player problem as before. We're waiting for Blizzard to add a glyph that makes Earthenwall Totem look like Pamela Anderson in Baywatch. But until then, people will be ignoring it like it's a call from your ex. Jokes aside, Resto Shaman is still one of the best healers, but possibly the easiest to grief in solo shuffle. And if there's one healer that we think has tons of potential, it's Restoration Druid. As a quick warning though, this is definitely one of the hardest specs in the game, especially this season. While it might not be the best at lower ratings, Resto Druids are starting to do well on the high end of the ladder. While last week's 5% healing buff wasn't huge, it's definitely helped close the gap. And in coming weeks, Druid might start to cook since they're getting one of the best tier sets out of any healer in Season 2. So while they might not be the star of the show now, get ready to see more trees in the arena. That brings us to our updated healer tier list for Week 3. While not much has changed since our last update, things are starting to feel a bit more balanced. Unless, of course, you play Mistweaver Monk or Holy Priest. And remember, if you're a skill cap member, you can now see Bistless directly in-game as a part of the #1 PvP UI. We've also got brand new courses for Season 2, including how to counter every class in the game. Positioning, we make it easy, and of course, our class guides teach you how to master your spec. Skill cap is #1 for a reason. Everything we offer is backed up by a rating gain guarantee. Yes, we actually promise you will gain rating while using our service. So if you want to get started, be sure to visit the exclusive discount link below. For now, we want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.